So this is It's Not Your Fault series, and this is our session 3. Remember, Journey to Better Health Through God's Pharmacy. So we're going to talk more about, God's pharmacy and what's out there for us today and how we balance that. How do we do that? In session 1, changes that impacted health is what we discussed on the first week. In session 2, we talked about metabolic adaptation. Session 3, we're going to talk about, and that's tonight, solving the problem. And I know a lot of you have been looking forward to this evening. Last week we talked about this cardiovascular surgeon's article, as you recall. And I wanted to touch upon it again tonight because I felt like we didn't really finish talking about some of the information that he shared on his clip. And I want to make sure that we talk about, in particular, statins tonight. Certainly don't give up your statins, but do look at changing the way you eat, because you can do something about getting that cholesterol and the triglycerides down through diet, and you may be able to, over time, get off that statin. So when you're taking statins, you can get sore muscles. They call those sore muscles rhabdomyolysis. You can have backaches, fatigue, and loss of CoQ10. So when you're losing CoQ10 out of the muscle, understand that CoQ10 is important for muscle contraction and for energy. So going back to the sore muscles, when you're taking statins, CoQ10 is removed from the muscle, from the statin, and CoQ10 is vital to your muscle contraction and energy production. So when you don't have enough CoQ10, you can weaken the muscle and you end up with sore muscles and even joints. My dad had this, the backache. And my dad, who was at the time 83, 84, had never had a back issue all of his life. And all of a sudden, he's having back issues. And I said, what's different, Dad? And he's on statins. And so the cardio doc said, well, I don't agree with you. And so we left the doctor's office, and my dad looked at me and he said, well, why doesn't he take them then? And see how he feels on them. I'm not taking them. And so he got off, and we did a lot of work with nutrition, and everything changed for my dad. I mean, his cholesterol stayed normal for years after that. And of course the fatigue, because if you're lacking CoQ10, you're going to be tired, right? So I wanted to sort of finish that off this week with reminding you that if you are on statins, go get yourself a good dose of CoQ10, because that's going to be important, all right? So take the statin, but take it with CoQ10. You can get a 200 to 300 milligram of CoQ10 daily, and that will help with any of those symptoms of muscle aching. And sometimes people don't make the connection that it's the statin causing the problem, so it's important to make that connection. I want to talk about the gastrointestinal tract. We're going to talk about GALT, gut-associated lymphoid tissue. This is an important topic because we have to understand the role that the gastrointestinal tract plays in our health. It's critically important that we have great gastrointestinal health. If the gut is not healthy, we're going to be impacted by all kinds of diseases, because why? We can't absorb the nutrients. So let's look at what gut-associated lymphoid tissue is. It's the mucosa that contains both B and T cells. This tissue is responsible for localized immunity to pathogens such as bacteria, viruses, and parasites. So this is your intestinal lining, but it's magnified. It's huge, right? And you don't really think that all of this exists in your intestines, right? But it does. And so in that intestinal tract, remember that the intestinal tract is long, 30 feet long. So it's all curled up in there in your abdomen. So lots of places where bacteria can kind of hide in there. And the thing about bad bacteria is that most of us at some point have taken antibiotics, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody in this room probably has been on antibiotics at some time in their life. Some of us have had more than others. People who've had a lot of antibiotics, think about when you were a child. Did you have a lot of ear infections? Did you have strep throat? Did you have bladder infections? Were you on antibiotics for earaches? People who are on a lot of antibiotics end up with a lot of gastrointestinal problems. So I want to talk about gastrointestinal problems for a minute, because when I was working last night, I was talking to a lady who had a lot of heat, if you will, coming from her wrists, her ankles, just touching her. You could feel the heat. So talk about inflammation systemically. She had inflammation systemically. I said to her, how's your stomach? How's your gastrointestinal tract? And she said, oh, good. I don't have any problem with that. I said, okay. So do you get gas and bloating? Oh, all the time. Have you had constipation or diarrhea? Oh, I get constipation all the time. So I'm trying to make a point here. Do you understand that we are not accustomed to what normal is in our gastrointestinal tract? Because we've all adapted to gas and bloating is normal for me. Constipation is normal for me. We're even told that going every 3 days to once a week for you is normal. One of my friends was told having diarrhea is your normal. And she had it for 10 years. So I guess I want to impart the knowledge here tonight about the importance of the gastrointestinal tract, and that getting that in good health is key to your health. You have to get the gastrointestinal tract in good health if you want the rest of your body to be in good health. This is where all your nutrients are absorbed through this gastrointestinal tract. And if it's damaged, you're not going to absorb those nutrients. It's impossible. All right? So if you're having diarrhea, what nutrients are you absorbing? Right? And this, by the way, this woman that had the runs for 10 years, she had all kinds of medical issues, and she was 35 years old. Multiple medical issues. And when I met her, I said, do you want to do this differently? And she said, absolutely. And so we went to work, and 3 days after she started the program, she had one formed bowel movement, and she said to me, oh my God, how's this possible? You know, yeah. I mean, so we can't accept that. And we can't, and you know, often I interview, you know, I'm going to pick on the men for a minute. I often interview men, and when I ask them questions, I'll ask them about, you know, their gastrointestinal health. And without fail, they all have good intestinal health. So that's when I start asking the questions. Do you get reflux? Oh, I have reflux all the time. I'm on a Protonics or whatever for it. Okay? That's not good health in the GI tract if you're having reflux. I mean, what we know about reflux is that chronic reflux can lead to chronic inflammation, which leads to abnormal cell growth, which eventually can lead to cancer. Right? So it's not a good idea to have chronic reflux. You want to find out why. What is the cause of that reflux? And deal with that cause. And then get it healed, repair it. So that's really important. So when we look at this, see how complex it is now? We've got some CD4 cells, which is part of the immune system. The T and B cells are here. This is all part of what we call GALT, gut-associated lymphoid tissue. That's why when we say 65 to 70% of our immune system lies in the GI tract, 30 feet, right, of all of this GALT tissue. So do you understand how important this is? I just want you to understand the importance of the gastrointestinal tract. So let's move. This is called a leaky gut. Anyone in this room ever heard of a leaky gut? Yeah. Okay. So here's what happens with a leaky gut. Let's say that you were on antibiotics as a kid, and you took a lot of them, but you never took a probiotic to replace all of the good beneficial bacteria that was destroyed when you took the antibiotic. Because when you're taking an antibiotic, it destroys the bad bacteria. We want to get rid of that, right? That's causing fever and all kinds of problems. But it also destroys the good beneficial bacteria in the gut. So you really need to take a good probiotic to replace that when you are on antibiotics so that you can get the good, normal, beneficial bacteria back up. Now, in the American diet, we eat a lot of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates feed the bad bacteria. All right? So if you've got a lot of bad bacteria in the gut and not a lot of beneficial bacteria, and you're eating sugar and white carbs and all of that, you're feeding the bad bacteria, and that will proliferate and grow and cause fermentation. Fermentation causes gas and bloating. So can you see why gas and bloating is not a good symptom to have? So you want to deal with that gas and bloating by increasing your good beneficial bacteria, and you also want to heal the gut. Okay? So these little hair-like projections are called villi, and we have them that line our intestinal wall. and they kind of move food along the intestinal tract. But sometimes when we get inflammation in the bowel, and remember, there's a long intestinal tract, so you can have, inflammation anywhere there. When the doctor goes in and does a scope on you, they aren't going to necessarily see that because it can be microscopic breaks in the intestinal tract. So it's not going to be seen through a scope, all right? So what happens is, let's talk about celiac disease for a minute. People who have celiac disease carry a genetic kind of component. If one parent has that genetic component, they're 25% likely to have that component. If both parents have it, they're 50% chance of having celiac. Now, if you can identify that you're having symptoms of gluten intolerance, then you can avoid getting celiac disease before you get to that point. But if you continue to ingest the gluten that is creating the problem, you're going to have full-blown celiac, and you'll be to the point where you can't even have a little bit of gluten without a major reaction. All right. So, and gluten, by the way, is a protein that is much harder to break than ever before. That protein now we add more gluten in our breads than we used to. And so it's stickier, more elastic dough, and it's easier to work with and stuff, but it also sticks to this villi. Okay, so we're ingesting it sticks to the villi. We've got bad bacteria that's, causing inflammation. Those villi start to wear down, and then what happens is that protein from the gluten starts to leak out into the system. It leaks out into the blood. And so you start to have food in your blood that doesn't belong there. Gluten doesn't belong in your blood. So the body kind of goes, oh boy, this doesn't belong in my blood, and it starts to send its messengers and its attackers to attack and get rid of that gluten that doesn't belong there. And that creates inflammation systemically. Same thing happens with dairy. Casein and dairy. Casein is in dairy products, and casein can be pretty sticky, and it happens to stick to these villi as well. And over time, you can have inflammation and leakage, and when that casein ends up in the blood, every time you ingest milk or casein, you will have this reaction, this inflammatory reaction. Now, my sensitivity is to casein. I had casein in my blood when I had an IgG test done. And there was a lot of other stuff in there because I was leaking for quite a while, and I didn't know. So identifying that allowed me to not ingest it and then begin to heal the GI tract. To this day, my body still identifies casein as bad for me. Now, if I have it for one day, I don't have too many symptoms. I'm pretty good. But if I do it 2 days in a row, I'm guaranteed to have joint discomfort. Now, who would make that connection that dairy and casein would give me joint discomfort, right? The same thing happens with gluten for people who've had this leaky gut situation. I had like 15 different foods in my IgG test. And the only reason that it was in my IgG test was because I was inflamed and I was leaking the foods that I was eating every day. Things like flaxseed, which is good for you, and I was eating that. So today, now that my GI tract is healed and I've brought up the good beneficial bacteria, I can eat all of those other foods, but casein is one of them that I can't. I was 27 when I started with issues. So we're talking a long time. And so my GI tract is very sensitive to dairy in particular. And dairy, let's talk about casein for a minute. Casein is a large molecule. It's made for calves, right? Calf's stomach. Cows, mothers, give milk to their calves, and so the calf's stomach can break that down pretty easily. But human beings are not designed to break down that huge protein that calves are. And we do pretty well breaking it down if we have a healthy GI tract. But once we have a damaged GI tract, it's very hard to break down that protein. Yes?
Is goat's milk better?
Is goat's milk better?
I've heard it is, but maybe not.
For somebody with a sensitive GI tract, goat's milk works really, really well. And I can do goat's milk and I don't have a problem. So when I talk to people with sensitive GI tracts and they're having trouble with the dairy, I often say to them, try goats, try some goats. But I always encourage people, don't get in the habit of eating it every day. That's when we get in trouble. We eat the same foods every single day. We do yogurt every single morning. We do oatmeal every single morning. We get stuck. We do whole wheat toast every single morning. So we end up getting in trouble when we do that. So varying the diet is very, very important. And this is where autoimmune disorders stem from. Name some autoimmune diseases, somebody out here. Anybody think of any autoimmune diseases?
Hashimoto's disease.
Hashimoto's disease, correct. What else? Lupus, correct. Rheumatoid arthritis. Allergies. People don't think of allergies as autoimmune, but isn't it? The body's self-attacking, right? It's an allergy, right? What about sarcoidosis, fibromyalgia? All of those are considered under the there's like 80 different types of autoimmune disease. Diabetes is autoimmune. Arthritis, joint inflammation, yep, can be all related to autoimmune disorder. So the immune system can't tell the difference between healthy body tissue and antigens. The result is an immune response that destroys normal body tissue. This response is hypersensitivity reaction similar to the response in an allergic condition. So remember the cell? Okay, just want to remind you that's what we're all composed of. And when these cells get damaged over time, they can't do the work of taking care of the carbohydrates for energy production and protein synthesis and everything else that we need to make the body healthy. All right, so let's move into talking more specifically about nutrients. There are two types of nutrients that I want to talk about tonight, the macronutrient and the micronutrient. The macronutrient is your carbohydrates, your proteins, and your fats. Your micronutrients are your minerals and your vitamins. We need all of those for the body to function efficiently, okay? So let's talk about carbohydrates first. They're important for energy production. It's actually the first place the body goes to get energy is carbohydrates. Why? Because carbohydrates are easy to metabolize. So the body doesn't want to have to do a lot of work. You know, it's hard work to break down fats for energy. So the body will take the easiest way out, and that's to use carbohydrates. It fuels the central nervous system. It enables fat metabolism. It's your preferred fuel source for muscle contraction and biologic work. This is a great chart about the way we eat, and how we eat is inflammatory. So if you look at this, this is your traditional American diet. Some of the nurses eat this way at the hospital. I see it all the time. When we get up in the morning, we eat a high carbohydrate meal like coffee and donuts for breakfast. And the body is going to secrete tons of insulin. And what happens is that within an hour to two, your blood sugar is going to come down rapidly. And as it comes down, you're going to start to feel tired and logy, have no energy. For some people, they can have some hypoglycemic type symptoms with shaking and sweating. So when you feel this way, you want to eat something quick. So often people will have a candy bar. A candy bar is handy, it's quick, it's going to bring the blood sugar up, give you a quick source of energy, and in about an hour or so, you're going to come crashing again. Again, the blood sugar has come down, and sometimes it can come down pretty low. Lunch comes around, and you have pizza and soda. And then about an hour or two later, notice the blood sugar hasn't dropped quite as much as it did with the candy bar, because with the candy bar, lots of insulin was secreted. With the pizza, there's a little better balance with some protein in there, so the blood sugar dropped, not as much, but still, a lot of insulin is being produced. And again, you start to feel hungry, so you have another snack. That snack can be something like potato chips, and then again, the blood sugar will drop. And then we're going to have pasta and salad for supper, and again, we're going to crash, and then we're going to have ice cream before going to bed, and then we're going to crash again. This is inflammatory. When we eat this way, we are producing a lot of inflammation. So remember I talked about autoimmune disease and how leaking out of the gut can produce inflammation. Now add to that the way we eat, and can you see how we are producing a lot of inflammation in the way that we're eating? Okay? So this is a far better balanced way of eating. This is the way we want to eat. So we get up in the morning, and again, our blood sugar's down, and we have steel-cut oats, we have nuts, seeds, fruit. Does everybody know what steel-cut oats are? Steel-cut oats still has the hull of the grain in it. And with the hull of the grain intact, you're going to process that more gradually and slowly, so you'll maintain your blood sugar through that morning. So you'll eat that, and the blood sugar will gradually come down. Have a snack mid-morning. You'll have almonds, and that will stay balanced. And when you balance a carbohydrate with nuts and seeds, that's protein. I want you to start thinking of the importance of balancing a carbohydrate with protein. Most of us don't eat that way, right? Most of us have toast for breakfast. Where's the protein with that? There's no protein. So we want to have protein with whatever we're eating in the morning. Start your day off that way. That's a great way to balance this. You see how the blood sugar doesn't crash? It comes down gradually. And then, mid-morning, you're going to have some almonds. And then, lunch will come. Your blood sugar will go down to 90 again. You'll eat your chicken breast and salad. It will come down again around 90. It's not going to crash. It's not going to, often it will crash down to 70 and 60 with the excess insulin load that's been given to the body. And that's inflammatory, to have your blood sugar dip, and then you get sweaty and shaky. All of those symptoms of hypoglycemia, right, occur. So that's why we're having those symptoms, because we're not eating in a balanced way. So if you did, let's say, chicken breast and salad, you'd be balanced here. Then you'd have some whole grain crackers and hummus. So what do we do here? We have whole grain, but we have hummus, which is a protein, to balance that off. And then again, grilled fish and some green vegetables. You could even have a sweet potato in there if you wanted. And then at night, have some clean protein before going to bed. A handful of maybe almonds, or eight walnuts equals a serving of protein. Or you could have a banana with some maybe nut butter on it, peanut butter or other seed butters on it to balance it. An apple with some nut butters, pistachio, a handful of pistachios. So what's going to happen is, because you've eaten that way, that blood sugar is going to stay pretty stable through the night, and you're not going to get up ravenous. People often wake up in the middle of the night and they want to eat. And part of the reason is they went to bed having a sweet. So their sugar goes crashing down, and then, the body wants more and craves more. So notice how many grains are in this diet. This is a great way to eat. It's so much better balanced. Think about the last chart we looked at and how many grains we were taking in. And now look at this one. How many grains are you seeing? 2 servings. If we can keep our intake to 2 to maybe 3 servings max a day of grain carbohydrate and make it whole grains, this is a much healthier way of eating. It's much more anti-inflammatory. Now, what else could you have for breakfast? Some eggs, a couple of eggs, but make those eggs eggs that are free range from a farmer in your neighborhood. Those animals are out there getting sunlight, and they're eating outside, and they're getting the nutrients they're supposed to get. You're going to get a much healthier egg than you are that processed egg. Because have you ever cooked an egg from a chicken who's outside grazing versus an egg at the grocery store that's not? When you cook it, you will see it's the one at the grocery store where the eggs are from the chicken that are all in the pens, all lined up and laying their eggs. Those eggs are pale yellow and they're flat. When you're cooking an egg from a chicken who's free-ranging, it's a nice darker yellow, and it's raised. You have a nice raised yolk. There's so much better nutrition in there. Eggs has gotten a bad rap. Eggs is a great source of protein. And, everyone has said, oh, it causes cholesterol problems. We were beginning to see it's not that's the issue with cholesterol. It's really the carbohydrates and the sugar that's the problem. So let's talk some more about carbohydrates. This particular slide explains the differences in carbohydrates. A monosaccharide is one simple carbohydrate, simple sugar. Name some, what would you think would be some of the simple sugars that this is used up like this, instantly? Honey, okay, yeah, honey's high in sugar, yeah. What else? Molasses might not be, it might be fall in the disaccharide family, yeah. Your high fructose corn syrup, your regular sugars, maple syrup may fall in that class. I got to look, Stephen gave me a list of good sweeteners. Sugar is sugar, doesn't matter if it's honey, whether it's, but there are some that are lower in glycemic index. It's still going to be used up pretty rapidly, okay? Your disaccharide is connected by this link. And that link, usually with a disaccharide, it's called an alpha link, which is a weak link. You have weak links and strong links, okay? The weak link is broken very fast. Your, again, sugar might fall into that class, and some, like your molasses might fall there. Maybe your maple syrup falls in that area as well. Your white flour falls in that area. There's nothing in white flour that's nutritionally beneficial, okay? So that will break real easily, and you'll use that up rapidly. Brown rice falls if it's brown rice. If it's white rice, it's right here, okay? If it's brown rice, it's going to fall here. This is a polysaccharide. Polysaccharides, see, these are beads. I like to use beads here. And these are beads that have their links. These are beta links. Beta links are strong. And why is that important? Because these links take longer to use up. So when you're eating, for example, steel-cut oats, it still has the hull in it. The stomach's going to work harder to break that link. So you're going to break the links one at a time. And the body's going to use what it needs for the carbohydrate, one at a time. So can you see why that blood sugar would stay nice and balanced for hours? Because of that, okay? But also, when you add protein to that, it brings even better balance. So let me just read from the Metabolic Makeover. Natalie is a physician who's a metabolic anti-aging doctor. It says here, clearly avoid all refined sugar products like the plague, because they are the plague. Avoid soft drinks, including the biggest health scam ever launched, diet soft drinks. Okay, that's the biggest scam ever launched. Retune your taste buds. It's important to enjoy your food, but food chemists have invented compounds that trick you into eating more than you need. They're not kidding when they say, bet you can't just eat one. As you increase your intake of unprocessed, whole natural foods, especially raw vegetables and legumes, you will be surprised at how fast your taste receptors become sensitive to the more subtle but less enjoyable flavors and textures. And this is the important one, number 4. Never eat unopposed carbs. Try to consume a high-fiber protein before or with the carbohydrate. Our motto is never be more than an arm's length away from a handful of almonds. Okay, so 120 calories, 5 grams of protein, 3 grams of fiber, and 2 grams of net carbs. So let's give an example. If you were to eat Concord grapes, the glycemic index is 59, right? So it's pretty high. Now take a handful of almonds with the Concord grapes. Your glycemic index drops to 20. Can you see the difference here? Now, the biochemist, Stephen Chernisky, I remember being on the health professional call with him, and he was sharing with our group that he was given a needle to put under his abdomen that he left in there for a full week to measure blood sugar all day long, 24 hours a day. And when he did that, he eats really well, and he knows how to eat balanced. And his blood sugar stayed good all week except for one night. One night he goes out to a Thai restaurant, and Thai food is good for you. But this Thai restaurant happened to be a pretty cheap Thai restaurant. He orders the brown rice with some seafood and vegetables. Now that sounds pretty balanced, doesn't it? He gets his meal, and most of it is rice and flecks of vegetables and flecks of some seafood. So he digs into his plate and he starts eating it, and halfway through the meal, his blood sugar skyrocketed to 180. And that's brown rice. That's a whole grain. So do you understand the benefits of the protein with that carbohydrate? You're going to bring that glycemic index down and keep things in balance. Okay, so remember your liver. We talked about the liver extensively last week and how the liver is such an important organ because it is our filtration system, right? And we talked about glycogen stores. And remember, too much of this sugar up here, the monosaccharides and the disaccharides, that is going to be stored as fat. When this glycogen store is full in the liver and there's no room to store anymore, the body's going to take it and produce fat. I want you to understand that. I'm going to read something from the book again that I think is so important. Triglycerides are a waxy substance floating in the blood. High levels of triglycerides greatly increase the viscosity, thickness of the blood, and are thus a major risk factor for cardiovascular disease. When people have high levels, it can even make their blood look creamy. I once had a patient whose triglycerides were so high that when we spun the test tube of his blood in a centrifuge, it looked like white candle. It was as if we could stick a wick in it and light it. And this fellow's heart was trying to pump that sludge through 50,000 miles of blood vessels to about 70 trillion cells. Do you understand the work of the heart involved in this? People often do not realize that when they eat bread, cookies, cake, pasta, white potatoes, they're creating more triglycerides and more wax in their bloodstream. I want my patients to keep trigs under 100 milligrams per deciliter. To put this into perspective, an athlete will typically have trigs in the 30 to 60 range. Why? Because they are on a daily basis using their trigs to fuel exercise. That brings me to the 3 most important things that you can do for your health. Number 1 is exercise. Exercise by far is the most important thing that you can do. Keep that in mind. If you are not exercising, you want to start a program of exercise. Critically important to your health. The second thing is eating a highly varied natural food diet. That's what we're talking about here tonight, is varying the diet, eating lots of different nutrition from different sources. That's vital to your health. And finally, number 3, supplementing. You need to supplement today. You will not get all the nutrition that you need from our American diet. It's sadly depleted, and the only way to get great nutrition is by supplementing. And we'll talk more about that in the next session. So the next macronutrient I want to talk about is protein. Okay, protein. They're essential to the structure of red blood cells. They are important for the proper functioning of antibodies resisting infection. They regulate enzymes and hormones, and they're essential for growth and repair of tissue. Protein is important for healing. You can't repair tissue if you're not ingesting that. So good quality protein allows you to repair. And we're beginning to understand more and more the importance of protein in muscle mass. As you're aging, you need protein for good quality muscle mass as well. So getting the carbohydrate level down, the protein level up, and I'm not saying excessive amounts of protein here. I'm talking you have a plate of food. A quarter of that plate is your protein. The rest is all vegetables. Okay? So I'm not talking half a plate of meat. All right? A lot of Americans eat 3/4 of a plate of meat. So we have to be, reasonable about how much we eat. But a deck of cards, the palm of your hand, that's a serving. That's a good serving. Fats are the last macronutrient we'll be talking about. Now, we've been told, and we talked about this a lot in the past 2 weeks, that we're not supposed to have a lot of fats. We're supposed to have a low-fat diet. But we need fats. They're important. Essential fats are obtained through the diet. They're called essential because the body needs them, and the only way to get them is through food. So if we eliminate all fat, are we getting our essential fats? No. All right? And they're critical to brain health. They're critical to cardiovascular health. And you'll understand in a minute what I'm talking about with the fats. They absorb certain nutrients. They maintain core body temperature. Good fats protect the heart and keep the body healthy, and the brain as well. This is where I want to really dive into fats. Omega-6 are inflammatory. Omega-3 are anti-inflammatory. Was a 3-to-1 ratio. Today, the ratio is 15-to-1. In some cases, 30-to-1. That's a very inflammatory way of eating. So when you eat ranges of 15 to 1 and 30 to 1, that's inflammatory. A healthy range is 3 to 1, it's more anti-inflammatory. All of your pastries, all of your crackers, all of those things contain those bad vegetable oils. They all have them in there, unless you're creating or making your own at home, all right? So all this processed stuff has the bad vegetable oils that we are ingesting sometimes 8 to 11 times a day. Look at your label and see if you see corn oil. See if you see any of those oils. You want to try to stick with the oils that are healthy oils. Again, omega-3 are all your vegetables. Your avocado is a great form of omega-3 fat. So as you're eating throughout the day, be aware of how much carbohydrate you're ingesting. Just kind of pay attention to how much you're eating. Be aware of how much of these fats you're eating and how much animal protein you're ingesting throughout the day. You know, start having, more like seafood and beans and nuts and seeds and those kinds of things that are going to be more plant-based. And remember, plants are more anti-inflammatory than animal protein. Dairy, by the way, falls in this animal protein category. I want you to think about how much dairy we consume as Americans. When I worked as a school nurse, the children had for breakfast, generally speaking, sometimes they would have yogurt. They always had a glass of milk with their meal, and they always had something with cheese in it. Cheese pizza, eggs with cheese in it. I mean, so there was always cheese. For lunch, they often would have, again, pizza, or they would have a hamburger with cheese, or they would have macaroni and cheese, or tacos with cheese, and their glass of milk. All right, and then for dinner, they would go home, and often they would have, a ham and cheese sandwich, or they would have, cheese for snack, or yogurt, or other form of dairy, ice cream. Do you see how much dairy we ingest? And that's inflammatory. So I'm not telling you not to have it. I'm telling you be aware of the amount that you are taking in. And don't do it every single day. I mean, that is the problem when we start ingesting a lot of these foods every single day, every day of the week. Rotate your foods. You will feel so much better on a rotation diet, I promise you. And when you get a lot of nutrition from all these different sources, I mean, one of the things that Lisa in the back adopted, and I think, who was it from Stephen Chiniski that said to try different vegetables? Yeah, they had talked, Stephen Chiniski and his wife had talked about, when you go grocery shopping, think to yourself, I'm going to eat something different this week. I'm going to look around to see a food that I've never tried, and I'm going to bring it home and I'm going to give that a try. Recently, Lisa tried jicama, and she had never tried that before. And she said, what does that taste like? And I said, you're going to like it, I promise you. Just buy the jicama, peel it, and chop it in julienne slices and put it on top of your salad, or you can cut it in pieces and you can use it like as a dip in your hummus. My family likes jicama as well. It's a great choice. So it's something that people aren't used to buying, but we need to buy more of. Kale is something people aren't used to buying. Buy more kale. Learn how to prepare it and eat it. A lot of people kind of crinkle their nose at it and they don't like it. But you know what? If you learn to prepare it, it can be really good. But you've got to learn how to prepare it so that it tastes good. She's asking, if you buy canned beans, and this is a really good question, because make sure when you buy canned beans, you're reading your label, because you can get canned beans and they have high fructose in them. All right, so you've got to be careful. They add sugar to them. You want to buy a bean that has just the bean in it, and maybe some salt. I don't mind a little salt. And yes, you drain them. You drain them and you can rinse them, and then you can put them in your favorite meal, however you want to do it. One of my favorite meals, and it's become one of Lisa's favorite meals, is a wrap. It's a bean burrito wrap. And I use Ezekiel. Are you familiar with Ezekiel grains? Ezekiel is a great whole, it's actually one of the best bread and English muffins out there. And they also have a tortilla. It's a sprouted grain, so it's not been processed and overheated, and there's no sugar and all those things added to it. And you can buy it anywhere. Hannaford, Shaw's, they sell it in the freezer section. So you can buy it, and the tortilla I use that as for my bean burrito, and I'll take black beans and heat it up, and I might put garlic with my black beans. I might put some other herbs, whatever you want to, however you want to do it. I like cilantro. Lisa doesn't like cilantro, so she wouldn't do that. And then I will add things like guacamole I've made, some salsa. I top it with like my kale salad, or I'll put lettuce, tomatoes, peppers, onions. I mean, you can put whatever. Just load it up with vegetables. It's absolutely delicious. It's one of my favorite meals. So the question is, if someone is intolerant to gluten, could they do Ezekiel? That's a really important question. Are you celiac? If you're celiac, I'd say avoid it, okay? If you are only sensitive, here's the deal. It's never been processed. There's none of that sticky stuff in it. It's sprouted. It's, when you take a grain and you're, preparing it and not processing it, most people don't react to that wheat that's in there. I don't see people, I mean, there are a lot of people that I've worked with who do it and do it well. But if you buy it and you find that you don't feel good with it, then you will know. Your body will tell you, I can't do this. And maybe you'll heal things, and in 6 months to a year, you'll be able to go back and try and see if you can, because you may be able to once you heal the gut. Because there are things that I couldn't do 11 years ago, like corn. I couldn't do corn. I can do corn today and not have a problem. Wheat was a sensitivity. I can do wheat with no problem, whole wheat today. But my dairy is still out of the question for me. So let's talk about carbohydrates for a minute. Because the question is, are you putting, when you're talking about the amount of grains you're having throughout the day, is that part of the grain, the quinoa and the Ezekiel? Yes, it is. Okay, it's a whole grain. Carbohydrates are also all your vegetables and fruit. I'm not talking about that. You can have as much of that as you want. I'm talking the grain carbohydrate. Okay, so if you had half an Ezekiel English muffin for breakfast, that's 1 serving, and you put some nut butters on it, almond butter, that will really help balance the blood sugar for the morning. And that can be a quick but good source for breakfast. Okay? You can do a couple eggs with it if you want more protein. Okay? Next, we'll review micronutrients. So vitamins and minerals, and I really want to talk about this because I work with a lot of people who come in to see me and they say, I don't like fruits. I don't like vegetables. Okay? Now, if you're not eating any fruits and vegetables, you are going to be badly compromised because you need these minerals. They're so important. They're essential nutrients. They perform hundreds of roles in the body, hundreds. They help shore up your bones, and I'll explain how they do that. They heal wounds, they bolster your immune system, they convert food into energy, and they repair cellular damage. All right, so let's talk about calcium for a minute. You're eating a lot of dairy, and you say, oh, I'm getting a lot of calcium, so because I'm getting all this dairy, right? So I'm eating, and my bones are going to be very, very healthy. And then the woman hits 50, and she goes to see the doctor, and the doctor says, you have osteoporosis. And the women are shocked. How can that be? I've been drinking milk all day long. I eat a lot. I have yogurt every day. I'm getting all this calcium. I should have healthy bones. All right? So that's what we think. Okay? But if you don't have a good amount of vitamin D, that's one of your vitamins, that's a transporter. It's going to transport the calcium to the cell to be used. If you have not enough vitamin D, it's not going to happen. All that excess calcium, the body's going to go, what am I going to do with all this calcium? So it will sometimes make plaque in the arteries. Or you'll have kidney stones, or you'll have gallstones, or something else, because you've got this excess calcium. And then people go and take a supplement of calcium on top of that. Can you see the problem here? And you got a low level of vitamin D. You've got to get your level of vitamin D above 50. So make sure with your physical exams every year you have a vitamin D level done. You want to know your level. It's really important that it be above 50. Between 50 and 80, 50 to 100. Mine last time I went was 88. I like it high. And I had some problems with my bones, so I wanted to make that better. And I knew that if I had a high level that I could improve that. So that's why I keep it pretty high. And there's, been some places, I think it's London, they did some research around vitamin D, and that keeping high levels of vitamin D will also improve your immune system. So the question that's being asked is, if I wear sunblock, can the sunlight get through the block? No, it can't. So you can't absorb your vitamin D. So, you know, I know that it's important to protect your skin from cancers and those kinds of things. But if you can go out in the sun for a half hour without block, half hour, 45 minutes, and build to an hour, maybe an hour a day, and get that sunlight an hour a day, and then protect your skin after that, that would be the way to go, all right, so that you can benefit. I work, you know, in psychiatry, and I work in mental health, and when you think of vitamin D as an important kind of, it's important for mood, because people who have seasonal affective disorder, you know, aren't getting sunlight. And so if they have good vitamin D levels, it will help deal with that depression. And we don't do that work in psychiatry. We don't do a vitamin D test. And we should. I mean, I believe we should, everyone that comes in should have a vitamin D. I'll tell you, in my years of working with patients and having them have blood tests, every single one of them have been low. Every single one of them. Some have been 7, 8, some 15, some 17, some in the 20s. So you want it above 50. The sunlight is important, but we don't have enough sunlight in Maine, in the Northeast. So if we don't have enough sunlight, we're not going to get the benefits. And then, remember our liver? Remember our liver and how challenged our liver is? Think about the liver, and you are aging. And that aging liver has to, now you're in the sun, it's got to take that sunlight, convert it to vitamin D for usage in the body. What if that liver's been so challenged it can't do that work? How are you going to get it? Only through supplementation. Okay, so we're going to talk about building a better body. Every single day, we reproduce 300 billion cells. That's a lot of cells, yeah. So our body replaces those 300 billion cells a day, but can you support that renewal of those cells? What's the likelihood that those cells are going to be healthy and robust or damaged? Right? What's the likelihood? Now, 35% of our cellular health is determined by genetics. So you inherit some things from your family, and there's nothing you can do about that, right? It's in your gene pool. The thing about that, though, is if you know that that's in your gene pool, it empowers you to say, okay, I have, you know, cancer in my family, or I have cardiovascular in my family. And so if you've got that knowledge, now you can do something about that, okay? So 65% is up to us. 65% is a lot. Think about that. 65%. Your personal seesaw of damage and repair. Look at the seesaw. Now, on one side is repair. When you are repairing and rebuilding the body, you have high energy. When you have low energy and you have damage and breakdown, that seesaw tips down, away from repair, and up in damage. You're going to not repair very well, right? And if you look at a young boy who's 6 years old, where are their repair signals? They're way high. They're going to repair, they break a bone, they're going to repair in 4 to 6 weeks, right? But somebody who's 70 and 80 may fracture a hip and go into a nursing home and never get out, right? Why? Because their damage signals are way up. But you can do something about that. You can actually shift that in your favor today. And most people don't know how to do that. So we talked about the foods that harm and foods that help. So we know that your inflammatory foods are all your animal protein, including dairy, sugar, and white flour, right? So those are your inflammatory foods right here. I'm not telling you not to have any. I'm telling you, let's bring that ratio back to a 3-to-1 so that we have a healthy way of eating. Your anti-inflammatory foods, let's eat more of those. We are not eating enough of those foods. We've put them in the back seat for the quick processed foods. That's what we all have done. We're eating more of those foods. So let's shift that balance. Let's shift back to discussing immunity. What can we do to improve our immune system? I told you that immunity lies in the gastrointestinal tract. I've explained that, I think, fairly well tonight so you all can understand the importance of it. We've talked vitamin D, keep levels between 50 to 100. However, we haven't talked about DHEA, and most people are not familiar with DHEA. In fact, if you go see your doctor they will know nothing about DHEA. In fact, if you say to them, I want to have a blood test, a DHA blood test, they're not going to know why you want that done. And they're going to ask you, why would you want that done? Because they haven't studied it in medicine. Do you remember, some of you may remember, some of you may not, but do you remember the sailors at sea getting scurvy? Okay. Well, for years, the scientists said that the reason that people were getting scurvy, it was because they were lacking vitamin C, right? And people didn't listen to that. Scientists told them, but doctors didn't buy into it. It took years and lots of people being sick before they made the connection that vitamin C was what people needed to prevent scurvy. The same thing happened with folic acid. Folic acid is needed to prevent birth defects. And, you know, for 20, 30 years, the scientists said that to the medical community. And the medical community didn't do anything about it. They lag in their adoption of new things. And so eventually they bought it and understand that today all vitamins, prenatals, have folic acid in them because folic acid is critical to prevent birth defects, okay? So understand that we're in the same kind of category with DHEA right now, is that doctors are not understanding the benefits. There's been some clear research. The DHA Breakthrough was the first book written in 1995. 1995, okay? That's the first time it got written. Then Stephen talked about it again when he wrote his other book, The Metabolic Plan. I think that was 2005. And his new book, The Metabolic Makeover, now. What has been done since those books have been written is that 7,000 studies have been done verifying that information. And still we're not adopting it. Do you know why? The number one reason why we're not adopting it, it's not a drug.
Can't make a profit.
That's right. It's not a drug, all right? So let me explain to you this great compound. The king of metabolic modifiers. Those familiar with my previous book no doubt understand my obsession with this prohormone. It is, after all, the most comprehensive, powerful repair signal in the human body and brain. You also know that DHEA levels fall after age 30, and that decline becomes steeper with every decade of life, until at age 75, most people are producing only 10 to 20% of DHEA they produced in their 20s. There is no biochemical in the human body that declines as rapidly, nor one whose decline can have more catastrophic consequences. Restoring DHEA is like amplifying the body's energy and vitality machinery, and it can be done safely. In the DHA Breakthrough, I proposed that this decline is actually a causative factor in declining metabolic fitness and not simply an effect of the aging process. In the metabolic plan, I provided a mountain of evidence to support that position. We know that people with metabolic syndrome have lower levels of DHA compared to people with the same age without that condition. I want to share with you that I have several of my friends that I have talked to about DHA. Some of them are nurses. And one of them that I had talked to had an autoimmune condition, and the doctors were telling her, do not have any stress in your life. Diminish the stress in your life as much as possible. And lo and behold, I think it was a few weeks later, a month later, her husband died. So stress was high, and she got sicker and sicker. And I said to her, please go have your DHA levels done. I want to know what that number is. It's called a DHEAS sulfate test. It's a blood test. Go have it done. And she said, she poo-pooed me, she didn't buy into it, they don't know about it in medicine, how come nobody's talking about it, my doctor's not talking about it, blah, 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 blah. That went on for 2 years. And her condition got worse and worse and worse. And now she's got the runs every day, she's got all the symptoms that she was having in her face, and thyroid problems, all kinds of issues. And so someone said to her, why don't you just try what Ann is trying to tell you? Just try it. So she finally went and had the number done. It was an 8. look at the levels. Levels for female, 200 to 350. Hers was an 8. For male, 350 to 500, because men have more muscle mass. Okay? So she said to me, well, you know, so yeah, I'm an 8, so what? You know, and I said, you're not understanding. I need to get you on this doctor's call. You're a licensed person, you can be on this call with me. So I got her on the call. She talked to all of the doctors on the call. And I said to her, please tell them what your number was. And she said 8. And they all went, what? They were aghast. And they said to her, do you know how serious this is? Do not ignore this. You can change things. You do not have to go down this downhill slope. And so she finally heard them. Wasn't hearing me, but she finally heard them. And she finally supplemented and got her levels up. I think she's like 280s or something now. She keeps her levels good. All of her symptoms got better. Her health is better. She feels great. She has better energy. She's blown away at the change. Okay? So I want you to understand it's an important compound that our doctors don't understand. And if you want to know your number, ask your doctor to do that blood test. It's called DHA sulfate. So that's a really good question. So the question is, what would cause that number to be that low? All right, so let's talk about that. What makes DHA low? When your stress is high, cortisol levels go up, DHA goes down. Anybody in your life had stress here, sitting here? Okay, all of us have. And I was very young when I first had some major stresses, right? Because I lost my fiancé. I was 19 years old. And so that's going to impact, the amount of stress will impact where DHA goes. Now, we talked about coffee in here. And coffee does not directly lower DHA levels. However, coffee does increase stress, right? We talked about how when you're ingesting 10 cups of coffee a day, it will raise the stress level. And so it will indirectly impact DHA levels as well. All right? Does that make sense? Also, you have a genetic component to that. So all of those things, it's not a simple answer. Our bodies are so complex. And I know that we have answers today that in 10, 20 years from now, we'll have more information, new information that will make us look at things differently even more. So there's more coming, and there's more to learn, but our body is complex, and we just don't know it all, and it's changing all the time. And you know, and some people, I've heard some people say to me, well, aren't you messing with Mother Nature by taking that pro-hormone? And I say to them, well, when you have a thyroid problem, are you messing with Mother Nature when you have to take a thyroid supplement? You got to have thyroid functioning, and you need that, right? If your pancreas stops working and you need insulin, insulin's a hormone, and you got to take the insulin. This is no different. You know, if your levels are low, I mean, let's talk about the centenarian. The centenarian who lives to be 100 years old, if you look at them, they have one thing in common. They all have good muscle mass. All these 100-year-olds have good muscle mass. But do you know what the other thing they have in common? They all have high DHEA levels. Because high DHEA levels will give you good muscle mass. They work hand in hand. The other piece I want to make sure I explain to you is that when you have low levels of DHEA, in the liver there are two pathways, interleukin-2 and interleukin-6. Those are inflammatory pathways. And when your DHEA levels are low, the interleukin-2 and interleukin-6 aren't doing the job. So your inflammation is going to be greater. So can you see that someone with a low level of DHA is going to produce a lot more inflammation? And what did we talk about tonight? But everything that we're doing that produces inflammation. So we've got to do all this work of eating better, balanced, getting in more foods that are anti-inflammatory, making sure our levels of vitamin D, DHA, and our GI tract is of good health. All of those things will create better health for us. And next week, when we come back together, we will talk. I'm going to give you some recipes. I'm going to give you some other handouts. And we're going to talk more about supplementation. Because I want you to understand that not all supplements are created equal. Let's just be real clear. You need to talk to your physician about partnering up with you for your health. Are you my partner or not? If they're not going to partner up with you, then you got to look for another physician. I mean, they should want your health. They should want you better. And if they don't understand this compound, connect with me. Tell the doctor, you know a nurse who can get them to talk to the biochemist and to several doctors. I have that ability to connect them if they want the knowledge. But I find most physicians don't have time and they aren't interested in gaining the knowledge. And they poo-poo it and they say, oh, it's not important. It is important. It's very important. Okay? So we will continue this discussion next week. I want to thank you for being here this evening. Remember, if you have questions and you want to connect with me, you can connect with me either by Facebook or via email. Here's my information. Next week is our last session. I'm looking forward to seeing you all then.